Alright fighters, how are you all doing? Now in today's video I'm going to be discussing a topic which so many combat sports athletes struggle with and need help with immediately to stop this from happening constantly throughout their careers. Now before I get into the actual content of the video and start sharing tips and tricks, I'm going to introduce myself. So my name is Finn Kenny and I'm a combat sports nutritionist living in Bangkok, Thailand. I work with MMA fighters, boxers, Muay Thai athletes, bare knuckle fighters, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu athletes and all forms of combat sports athletes, and I help fighters make weight with ease, basically taking out the stress of making weight and allow them to have the performance of their life, and we can continue this every single fight they have. And I'm on a journey to becoming the best combat sports nutritionist who has ever done this job and in the world, in the history of the game. Now let's get into some of the actual theory behind what we're going to talk about in this video, which is preventing post-fight binges and weight increases. Now it's a problem that a lot of combat sports athletes struggle with, no matter which type of combat you're in, whether it's boxing, MMA, Muay Thai, bare knuckle, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it's regardless of the sport. So the reason why this actually happens in the first place is due to heavy restriction during your fight camp. Now normally a combat sports athlete will do a fight camp for around 10 to 12 weeks usually, and the fight will be planned at the end of that fight camp, so you've got a big enough time period to actually prepare, improve your skills, your technique and get fitter for that camp, so you can basically be in the best possible position to win your fight and, you know, to improve as a fighter. Now what you should actually be doing is, and the reason why fighters go wrong is that throughout their entire camp, they focus way too much on the way that the scale's moving. Now, this is obviously important to take into consideration, but what you've got to actually understand is the main goal of your fight camp. So when you're doing this 10 to 12 week fight camp, the goal is to actually bring down your weight gradually, but focus on improving your performance as a fighter. And what a lot of fighters have the mindset of is, I need to keep my food intake low, restrict my carbs, my calories, in order to keep my weight low, and then I won't have any problems making weight for my fights. Now this is actually not the truth. So what you actually want to be doing is you want to actually just start this off at the beginning. So what you want to do is you want to work out your weight at the beginning of your camp, and then you need to work out how much you've got to lose up until your actual weigh-in. And what you can do alongside this is you can plan your calories, your food intake, but the most important thing is actually managing and checking your weight. Don't obsess with it, don't do it religiously. 2 to 3 times per week is absolutely fine. The way I do it with the fighters that I'm working with is we'll check on a Monday, empty stomach, a Wednesday and a Friday, and then we can see after 2 or 3 weeks the way that the scales actually change, and then we can make adjustments from there. So what this actually allows us to do is we can actually then push up the food in calories and carbs specifically as much as possible, while still either maintaining the weight or dropping that weight very slightly. Because what you've got to understand is lowering that calorie intake and lowering your carbs is going to make your performance in training suffer. Okay, so what actually happens with a lot of fighters is they'll avoid all this that I've just said and just mentioned, and what they'll do is they'll restrict themselves throughout their entire fight camp, and then when it comes to a couple of weeks before the fight, then they start being strict, start getting discipline in place with the diet. They've already got the discipline in place with the training, but now they're starting to figure out making weight for the fight. And what happens in this situation is fighters will try to restrict everything that they possibly can, food intake, carbs, won't eat any treats. And I've heard some really silly stories in terms of how fighters have made weight, which I'm not going to go into in this video. But what happens here is, and the problem with restriction close to your fight week, is that you end up not eating any food. You're basically starving yourself and forcing yourself to make the weight. And then once you've actually made the weight for your fight, you have the fight regardless of whether you won or lost. And then this is where the problem actually starts. This is the main problem that you need to avoid. So after this fight, don't get me wrong, we're all human beings. We can all have a treat after the fight. We can all have a burger, a Nando's, some pasta, whatever meal it is that you've been craving, and a meal that you would typically enjoy to relax. Do you know what I mean? You've been dieting for months on end. Most of the time, like I say in this video, you've been restricting and not been doing too much with your food intake, and you're trying to make up for what you wasn't able to eat and consume during your fight camp. And then I've heard fighters who go on binges for, you know, weeks on end, and then they've all of a sudden gained 10 to 12 kilograms within a short period of time. You've got to understand that it's so easy for the body to gain than it is to lose. You'll have a much harder time losing than you will to gain, because the body's designed to have an unlimited storage capacities from ancestral times. But what you want to do is to avoid this from happening. Like I said, we've already mentioned the main tips for your fight camp to stop restriction and binging. But after your fight, just have one day of a relaxed eating approach. Like I say, have one of the meals that you enjoy, and then after you've done that, get right back onto your diet. Now, I'm not saying you need to eat freaking white turkey, white rice, and spinach and lettuce. What I'm saying is when you've had that one day of a slight relaxed eating plan where you've ate some foods that you like, get straight back on it, get your calories dialed in, get your macros dialed in, start eating a balanced approach, start increasing your training levels, and start managing the weight again 2 to 3 times a week. And I can guarantee, if you follow the tips I've just given you in this video, very simple, and you execute these, you will have a much easier time, obviously making weight for your fights, number one, and number two, you're going to find that your weight isn't going to increase and bounce up and down like crazy in between your fights. Now listen guys, that is enough of me ranting on and giving you advice into preventing post-weighing weight increases and binges. But if you like this information and you want some more nutrition and diet tips just like this one, don't forget to give me a subscribe to my YouTube channel for more. But for now guys, I hope you've enjoyed the content in this video, and have a great day.